Welcome back, MMA fans, and welcome to part 3 of the 2020 MMA Prospect Series featuring the Featherweights. A huge video this one is, featuring 35 fighters from across the globe. And this video will differ a little bit from the other videos so far in the series. We'll have some can't-miss prospects. We'll also have some guys that are still prospects but are approaching the age of 30. And it's more of a shout-out for those guys to kind of get them some eyeballs. And then we'll also have another group of prospects that are untested and still have lots of need for development, but still decided to include them in the video. For those of you that are new to my channel, the rules for these videos: no fighters that I've mentioned previously. So if I mentioned a fighter 10 years ago, 5 years ago, that sort of thing, you won't hear him again. No UFC experience, no contender series experience, no Ultimate Fighter experience, no Bellator, no PFL. We try to stay away from any names in Risen or ONE FC. By some chance, you may see a person from those organizations, but it would be a guy that's, brand new to them. And also, no big names from an organization like KSW. For the most part, most of these fighters come from little or unknown promotions around the world, or promotions that are big in a particular country. Some fun facts about today's video. The combined record of our 35 fighters featured is 311 wins and only 18 losses, so it's quite impressive. And also we have fighters from 15 different countries, which is super cool. In today's video, we'll move through fighters much quicker than we have in the past. Some guys will get some more detail, but some of the folks will be very quick because it is such a large amount of fighters. I want to keep it to, say, with under an hour or so in this video. So without further ado, I'm excited. Let's get started. We'll start this baby off. The first fighter we're going to talk about is Ilia Topuria. 23 years old, 5'8", 145 pounds. I'm not sure. I think he's born in Germany, but he's born to Georgian parents, and I think he moved to Spain at age 15. 8 wins, 0 losses, 1 TKO victory, 7 submissions, 7 first-round stoppages. The association he's with is Climate Team. Let's look at some key wins. 6-3, Stephen Concalves. He's beat 9-3, Brian Boulard, and 8-2, Mika Hamilton. So some decent victories. Again, as always in my videos, check out the section below for video highlights. And I've got some dandies here of Torah that I'll put in the section below, 3 or 4 videos. This guy finishes fights, folks, and he's fun to watch. And from what I can gather, he started Greco-Roman wrestling at a very early age. Apparently in 2018, he became a BJJ black belt, and that makes sense because he's very slick and dangerous on the ground. He's a pretty nasty guillotine, and he loves to get that top position. Once he's on there, he's really hard to get off. And surprisingly, he seems to be in no rush to get the fight to the mat. He's pretty comfortable on his feet, throws a nice jab, and has shown in his last fight he has one-punch knockout power. So very exciting, very young and talented fighter. I would say he's 1 or 2 wins away at the most to get in the call to, say, the UFC or Bellator. Most likely the UFC. If he does decide to stay with Brave FC, however, he does have a tough fight in front of him. His former Bellator veteran and wrestling ace, Bubba Jenkins. So, risk versus reward or play it safe will be the big question for him. Nonetheless, a very exciting fighter and a great way to kick this video off, Ilia Topuria. Next on the list, Igeu Kabesa, 26 years old, 5'8", 145. I believe he was born in Congo. He was made home in South Africa for a while, it sounds. 12 wins, 1 loss, 5 TKO submissions, 5 TKO victories, 2 submission victories. Fight Fit Militia, Chivalry Bloodsport is his associations he trains with. Some key wins. He's beat Carlo Caput, who's 8-1 with a first-round KO. It was a nice victory. 24-17, Paulo Pereira. His 2 losses he split. He with UFC veteran Daniel Henry, who had a win against him and a loss against him. And he's beat Peter Queally at 12-5. Also got some great videos you'll see of this guy in the section below. Check it out. Very exciting, aggressive, athletic fighter that finishes fights. Again, I believe he was born in South Africa. He started training wrestling at a very young age. And I also believe he may have went 10-0 as an amateur. So he got a decent background, amateur background. Very powerful ground and pound. And again, very athletic and comfortable on his feet. Shows KO power. As over half his fights were won via TKO. Also showing some pretty good submission skills. But more relies on his wrestling, his ground and pound, than is strictly his jiu-jitsu. Two-time UFC champ, multiple time national wrestling champ, amateur African fighter FW champ. He's taken a step back apparently from mixed martial arts to focus on wrestling. Apparently trying to represent his country at the Worlds, I believe. And I'm surprised he hasn't been picked up by the UFC or Risen or Bellator. Again, he's a very exciting fighter, so let's hope to see him back in the ring soon. Definitely a guy that could, fit in with one of those big organizations. Next on the list, Leonardo Limberger. 25 years old, 5'9", 145 pounds, 13 wins, 1 loss, 2 TKO victories, 5 submissions. Rizzo RBT is association, a Brazilian fighter. Key wins, he has a lot of them. Boris Fedorov, who's 10-2, 13-3 Fabricio Martins. He's beat 19-7 Donny Matos, 11-5 Max Lima, 7-3 David Souza, 44-19 Jamil Siviera, 20-9 Claudia Duckvegas, 9-4 Macon Miller. So, I mean, he's beat a lot of good guys with a ton of experience. He hasn't taken the easy route. He hasn't fought a lot of cans. He has a very tough fight coming up against 44-year-old, amazing 44-year-old fighter Merad Badayev, who fights for ACA, and it's at ACA 106. So, very tough fight ahead of him. Most of the footage you'll see on Leonardo is older, 5 to 6 years old, and he has made some massive improvements since then. But even back then, he looked good. Shows pretty good strikes, throws punches and bunches, and also shows some pretty good leg kicks. Of course, with 5 submission victories, obviously his key to success is getting the fight to the mat, and using his jiu-jitsu. And at 13-1, with all of those good fighters he's beat, it's surprising again that this guy hasn't been picked up. And now he's approaching that ACA, very tough Russian organization, so he's going to get some tough fights in there. And, if he can come out of there undefeated, how many fights he has, I'm not sure in his contract. But if he comes in there and wins some fights, definitely you'll see him getting picked up. But to go in that killer 145 division in the ACA organization is going to be a challenge for him. But nonetheless, another young, exciting fighter that I'm looking forward to seeing. Next on the list, we're going to move over to Russia. Anzor Abdulkhozhaev. So some of these names are hard to pronounce, but there'll be a lot of them today. 22 years old, 5'10", 145, really good size featherweight. Again, the Russian fighter, Akhmed Fight Club, loaded with tons of talented fighters. 10 wins, 1 loss, 4 TKO victories, 3 submissions. Key wins, 14-8, Nikolby Kajavov, 12-9, Rolando Dai, 12-9, Arjin Mirabekov. Hasn't fought a ton of high-level competition. But most of the fighters he has fought have winning records. There's some cool video footage of him, some of his fights, 3 or 4 fights, some knockouts, some submission victories. He's an aggressive, young, striking, good striking, and powerful ground and pound. And he fights at a high pace. And of course, he's surrounded by great fighters in his camp. 7 stoppages out of his 10 wins. 3 of them being by submission, just speaks about kind of that good versatility he has and his ability to finish fights in many ways. And just another young fighter that's added to the just monsters list of Russian prospects in the sport. It's incredible how many there is. With his record and his age, it's easy to say that 2 or 3 victories, this guy gets a call. So keep an eye out for him. Next on the list, and this is a guy that I'm very excited to talk about. Just a tremendous set of hands. Bibert Tumenov. Of course, Albert Tumenov's brother. Tumenov, when he was in the UFC and now in ACA, he's just a tremendous striker. One of the better welterweight strikers, kickboxers in the world. Some of the newer folks don't know him because he hasn't fought in the UFC in a few years, but just a tremendous striker. And his brother is no different. His brother is a boxing background, and not as much as a kicker as his brother Albert, but Bibert has tremendous hands, and boy, oh boy, can he knock you out. 5'8", 145 from Russia. Baston Fight Association, of course, in that organization is his vicious striking brother Albert. 8 wins, 1 loss, 6 TKO victories. Talking about his key wins, he made his ACA debut last night. What a knockout he had over Kyle Reyes, who's 15-7. Great way to start off on a promotion. 7-1 Marabek Kasimeve. 4-1 Andrei Kospanov. 5-1 Zigamatos Ramaska, and 7-3 Arabek Kustakov. So he's beat some really good guys. He's only 9 fights in. And the fighter that did beat him we'll talk about later here, but it was a really close, gritty fight. Take a look at the videos I put in below. He really is one of the best boxers in MMA right now, definitely on the regional scene. Great hands. Again, comes from a fighting family and looks like he has a decent boxing background. You can see some of his fights online, and not much for statistics on his boxing background, but definitely one to watch for. He's a southpaw fighter. He throws a hard straight left and with big power. And the big question is, like his older brother, is what's his ground game like? And he really needs to make sure he works in that takedown offense, because today with social media, it's so easy to find out and watch footage on a fighter that everybody he fights is going to want to take him down because of those nasty hands. But nonetheless, this is a guy I'm very excited to see where he goes. Again, let's see him working that wrestling, and surely this guy would get a call to the big show if he's able to get out of the grips of the ACA contract. But in that organization, again, he's going to get some tough fights, and a lot of the fighters we're going to talk about today, half a dozen or so, fight in that organization. So tough fights ahead at 145. Next on the list, Zhora Ayvazyan, 24 years old, 5'7", 145, Armenia, 9 wins, no losses, 6 TKO, 1 submission, Lionheart team. Key wins, 16-12, Julio Cesar Alves, and 5-1, Abdurrahimov Gitsnatovs. So, it's mostly fought lower level competition. There is a couple of videos, I'll put in the links below. World Combo Sambo Champion is where we should start. So obviously with that base, it makes him an interesting prospect. He uses his wrestling to get the fight to the ground, and then he uses heavy ground and pound from top position on his opponents. Very powerful, athletic guy, and he's slowly starting to gain some momentum in his home country. Finishing 7 of his 9 opponents, including 6 first-round finishes. So this guy likes to get the fight over fast. Obviously, the stand-up is where he needs improvement, but he likes to use that. He closes the distance pretty well to set up the takedown. But a very interesting prospect because of his his compactness and his strength and his background. So if he can make slight improvements on the feet, again, this is a guy, and we're due for some Armenian prospects to get to the UFC or Bellator. It'd be great to see. Moving right along, and again, we're going to try to move fast, folks, with these fighters, because we're just really scratching the surface for this one. Joanderson Brito, 24 years old, 5'6", 145, fighting out of Brazil. Ramado Shoot Boxing Borough, 11 wins, 2 losses, 1 draw, 5 TKO, 5 submissions, 11 fight unbeaten streak after starting his career at 1-2. His last loss was in 2015. Key wins: a violent KO over Jose Mariscal, which I have the video below. Got to check that one out. Ferocious knockout. 10-3, Establia Mato, 21-6. Jose Zarov, 10-2. Wabik Parado, 24-7. Johnny Iswaki, 10-3. Vanderlei Jr., 12-8. Roger Ferreira. So he's beat some really good guys. No cans at those guys I just talked about. Tons of experience. Former Fusion FC champ and currently fighting in the LFA promotion. So if you're in the LFA and you're making a little bit of noise, the next step is UFC for sure. They pick a lot of guys up from there. This guy is a bull. He moves forward and fights very violently. He is throw wide, a little bit wide with his punches and kicks, but he's got power, and he's the kind of guy that you can see becoming a Mike Perry type of guy, or in the UFC, those kind of guys that are somewhat of a gatekeeper but a real brawler. And that's one area you like to see him tighten up, is some of that brawling. But man, this guy's powerful, and he can finish fights on the feet, and he can submit you, as shown with his 10 finishes out of 11 victories, and split down the middle with 5 TKOs and 5 submissions. So now that he's in the LFA, I really urge you to check out that knockout in his last fight. Just a very violent knockout. And, a win or two for sure, entertaining win or two for sure, gets him the call without a doubt. Next on the list, Willian Souza, 23 years old, 5'11", 145, 10 wins, 1 loss, 8 TKO, 2 submissions. Fighting out of Brazil, Dimitri Fight Center. I'm going to say for key wins, 8-3, Deberson Batista. Other than that, most of his fights he has fought guys with little experience, lower level. There is a couple of videos I'll put in the section below. Willian finishes fights. Both with strikes, but he's shown that he can submit you as well. He's a BJJ black belt and a jungle fight 145 champ. Again, all fights via stoppage. So, and he's reeled off 10 straight victories. And there's not a ton of footage on him. Again, he looks like he has room for improvement, but with that many victories, that kind of a streak and that many stoppages, and the fact that he's a jungle fight for 145 champ, then he has to be included in the mix. He's got a great opportunity to keep improving. He's surrounded by so many great fighters, to train with him, and he's got the athletic ability, he's got the size, he got that kind of reach, that kind of stuff. So definitely a guy, when you're in jungle fighters as well, if you get in a good streak there is a lot of eyes on that, so there's a good chance of getting picked up. Next on the list, heading back to Russia, Timur Khizriev, 24 years old, 5'7", 145. Surprise, surprise, another Dagestan fighter. Dag Fighter Association, 8 wins, no losses, 2 TKO victories. Key wins, he's the guy who's beaten the previously mentioned Bibert Tumenov. He's the only guy to beat Bibert, and man, that was a good fight. That Bibert could have won, but Timur really showed his toughness. And I say his other nice victory was over 9-6 Max Puchayev. So he hasn't beaten a lot of top-level competition. He's beaten, he's still beaten some tough guys nonetheless. Some videos, again, check it out. You'll see a nice face kick KO for him, and I believe it was an RCC. It was a Russian promotion anyways, one that I watch quite often. But you'll see a nice face kick KO, and also he's fought in the Bear Cook Young Eagles, part of the ACA Association. So this guy's going to get some tough fights. Young, athletic, well-rounded, Dagestan prospect. Surprisingly, I was expecting more wrestling from this guy, but it appears he likes to keep the fight standing and fight on his feet. And he's not flat-footed, for a guy with a wrestling background. He does have decent hands and decent low kick. He's showing he can do well on his feet, but when he gets the fight to the ground and controls you, he can finish you. And he also can go to the distance very easily. So, and at 24 years old, 8-0 in that background, he still has a lot of upside, and looking forward to see where he goes next. Next on the list, Mochamed Machaev, fighting out of Austria, 20 years old, started fighting pro at a very young age, 5'7", 145. Gym 23 is his association, 8 wins, no losses, 4 TKO victories, 1 submission. Let's talk about his opponents. He's beat 14-8 Yaroslav Pokrany, 9-3 Philip Maya, and 5-2 Thomas Kapul. He's also dabbled in kickboxing, so check out the videos below. And I know one of them is against a high-level kickboxer. Again, young, athletic, undefeated at just 20 years old. We talked about his MMA background and also his K1 kickboxing background. Very light on his feet. Likes to keep the fight staying, but also uses that takedown to set up aggressive, powerful ground and pound. And you'll see that in some of his fights that I've attached. Again, it'd be great to see a fighter come out of Austria. Not a lot of guys coming from there that make it to the big scene. So if he's managed properly, gets another couple of fights, you can easily see this guy getting the call soon. Next on the list, heading back to Russia, Ravil Korobov. 20 years old, 5'8", 145, 7 wins, no losses, 1 TKO, 3 submissions. Key victories. His last fight was a first round TKO over 23-7 Alexei Olnik, so a win over a 40-fight veteran. His combined record of his opponents is 34-28, so not a lot of victories over folks with big winning records. The videos you'll see below are RCC intro, where he has, he's showing some pretty good skills in terms of an undefeated prospect. He's definitely one that's untested. And I went back and forth whether I include him or not in the video, but given his age, given his record, and that he started fighting at 17 or 18, again, I kind of just made the call. Let's include him in there. There's a lot of upside to this guy. He's got 4 stoppages out of the 7 victories. It looks like his striking's decent, and he's got some very good grappling capabilities on the ground. And I like his submission game. So with another 2 or 3 fights, again, it's another guy out of Russia that could get the call. Next on the list, and boy, we're probably only about a third way through this. It's going to be a long video, folks. So hope you got some popcorn. Tariq Ismail, 29 years old, 5'8", 145. He has fought at 135. Born in Kuwait, but fighting out of Canada. Open Mat Mixed Martial Arts is his association, and he's got 6 victories against no losses. Key wins, 9-5, Cedric Doyle. Most of his opponents don't have a lot of experience. There is a couple of videos you'll see below. And Tariq is a very technical, solid striker. He's one of those guys where he's 29 now, and he's got a Muay Thai background as well. He's had lots of Muay Thai fights, and he's kind of on the bubble. I don't think he's going to have a ton of improvement. He's probably close to his peak. Sure, there's some things he can improve on, but I decided to give him a shout out to hopefully see this guy get a shot. I know he started training martial arts in the late 2000s, so 2007, 2008, and he has fought professionally as Muay Thai as well, as I mentioned. He was also a 2-time boxing champ, and a Canadian provincial boxing champ, and a Canadian Muay Thai champ. A Thailand Pick 1 Muay Thai champion. He also competed at Al Batao Season. That's kind of like a reality show, an Arabic TV MMA reality show. Again, he's very comfortable on his feet. Throws great leg kicks. Hasn't finished any fights MMA, which is surprising, but if you see the guys he fought, their records aren't great, but they're tough guys. But he still has one-sided victories. So he's a guy, again, at his age. Check out his fight. If you're like striking, you like him. He's very technical. He's a good fighter, and I like to see him get a shot. Maybe in Bellator to start out. Certainly he can win fights at 145 in Bellator, and who knows, maybe even UFC. But hopefully he keeps fighting. I know he had a big contract dispute with the TKO organization out of Quebec, Canada. But I'd like to see more of this guy, so hopefully you'll see him pretty soon on a bigger screen. Next on the list, going back to Russia, another Dagestan fighter. And I'm going to struggle with his last name, but Georgy Shakhruramazanov. Fighting Eagle, very deep and talented fighters in that association. With lists like Muslim Salikov, Askar Askarov. 23 years old, 9 wins, no losses, 3 TKO victories, 2 submissions. Key wins over 7-4. Sadiq Radugan, 4-1. Demalti Trupanov, and 4-1. Omar Gazanov. Another great, seemingly endless fighter to come out of Dagestan. Man, the list just keeps growing. Very athletic, very, very tough, dominant wrestler. And we're seeing that from a lot of these Dagestan fighters. He's finished over half his opponents from a variety of ground and pound / TKO and submission. So you see the versatility. He also throws nice low kicks to set up that takedown, sorry. And also has a mix throw. I've seen him throw a couple of nice head kicks as well. So again, I'm not going to talk a ton about this guy, but it's because of his record, his fight camp, his background. Definitely got to keep an eye out for him, and you could see this guy soon. Next on the list, another guy I went back and forth on, but again, I could not include him because of his flashy finishes. So Dawid Śmiełowski, fighting out of Poland, MMA Wicklow, 6-0, 4 TKO victories, 2 submissions. He also had quite a few amateur fights. 24 years old, and he's a huge featherweight at 5'10". Key wins, again, most of his opponents have been lower amount of experienced opponents, and, you know, not a lot of higher level skilled guys. So from a video standpoint, you got to check out his victory. A must-see flying knee KO. Brutal KO. I mean, just terrible. And he also had a slugfest fight where he won by a head kick KO. I'll include that as well. And, you know, one thing I will say about him, he's a huge featherweight. He's a monster with tons of reach at that division. Finished all his opponents professionally with, you know, some very brutal KO stoppages. And that flying knee kick I talked about, he was losing that fight until the dying seconds, and against a wrestler, and he found a way to come back, and just a horrific KO. So he's one of those guys where in Poland I see him maybe another fight or two. I would say you'll see this guy in KSW. I mean, it's not to say the UFC won't pick him up, or, you know, even a Bellator, but I would say he may fit that mold for that, you know, brawling, aggressive, stand-up, exciting kind of fighter that KSW tries to get. So one day you could see him in a big screen, but right now he's untested. He just has some really flashy finishes. Again, he was losing some of those fights that he came back to win. But at his size, his age, his ability to finish fights, man, I hope we see more of this guy. And next on the list, just getting my notes straight here, as it appears we have mixed up some names. So bear with me for a quick second, folks. All right, Kurban Taygibov, fighting out of Dagestan, Russia, 24 years old, 5'10", 145. 10 wins, 1 loss, 4 TKO victories. And after losing his first pro fight, 10 straight wins. Sambo Filter Eagles MMA is the association. Key wins, 12-5, Abdul Tumenov, 16-8, Jose Soares, and 19-4, Philippe Froze. 18-8, Lomi Al-Najaf, Igor Zurkov at 12-3. So he's beat some really good guys in his young career. And again, another guy fighting in that ACA tough organization in the 145-pound division. Check out his videos below. The Dagestan list continues, folks. I don't know what to say. In just this very ever-evolving world of Russian fighters, it's incredible. A very solid stand-up fighter. He uses good feet work and pressures his opponents to close the distance. He uses the cage well, and he's beat lots of tough, experienced opponents. So he uses his hands, and he uses that kick effectively. Throws a nice straight right hand, and you know, like it's kind of weird in Russia. Sometimes you get fighters with wrestling that only wrestle, sometimes just striking, and sometimes it doesn't seem like there's difference between, like the gap is not closed between those two types. But lately, a lot of these guys are, you know, showing more versatility. And he's shown to have improving wrestling, and, you know, jiu-jitsu is the big question for him. What kind of grappling he has, submission skills. I haven't seen much of that. But in that promotion, he's going to get tested for sure. But nonetheless, an exciting prospect. Next on the list, Ali Magomedov. So, Dagestan, Russia again. This is another guy, he's 30 years old. So I'm back and forth. Do we include this guy? Do we not include this guy? Decided that we're gonna. 8 wins, no losses, 4 TKO victories. Wild Hearts MMA team. I'd say he's at his peak, but because I like to see him get some exposure, he's undefeated. He's a guy at 30 years of age that doesn't have a lot of miles on him, so he's still, in my mind, have lost ahead. Key wins: 6-2 Antis Shemakov, 8-7 Afi Cape, and 19-8 Askirov Jumanaki. So he's beaten some decent guys. Again, he's got a wrestling background, wrestling since childhood. So once you see him, you realize right away he's a very strong and athletic fighter. Very powerful with wrestling. Good ground and pound. Doesn't really go for submissions, but once he gets you where he wants you, he uses that ground and pound to finish fights. And again, short, compact, aggressive fighter, and built kind of perfect for the 145-pound division from a wrestling standpoint. So check him out. Next on the list, fighting out of Peru, which is great. Be great to see another fighter from Peru getting the UFC or Bellator. Rudy Gavidia, Team Bad Boy, 6 feet 145, so a massive 145er. 28 years old, so he's at that age where it's time. 13 wins, 2 losses, undefeated in 10 years. 5 TKO, 5 submissions. After starting his career 1-2, I believe he's on a 13-fight win streak. Sorry, 0-2. He's on a 13-fight win streak. Key wins, not a large amount of wins over notable guys. He's beaten a 13-5 Vargas, 9-6 Emmanuel Rivero, and 11-5 Alan Rama. Some pretty cool footage of him. You want to see a really violent KO slam? Check it out against Vargas. He picks him up and slams him on his head, knocks him out cold. Again, undefeated in 13 fights in 10 years. So regardless of who you have fought against, that streak is going to get you some attention. And the fact that he finishes fights, 10 of 13 victories by way of stoppage. Also, I'm not sure what belt level he's at in jiu-jitsu, but apparently he's got a pretty decent jiu-jitsu background. And apparently he's also had a pretty decent boxing run in China in the late 2000s. 2008 and 2009, he had quite a bit of success in amateur boxing there. So, being at his record, being a guy from Peru with, they're exciting, that's big, that finishes fights, you would think the UFC or Bellator would like to expand into that area and he'd be a guy you'd pick up. So check him out. Next on the list, again, going back to Russia, Askhab Zulaev, 22 years old, 5'9", 145, 7 wins, no losses, 4 TKO, 3 decisions, fighting out of Russia. He's beaten the previously undefeated 6-1 Tilimir Blagonostov, 12-5 Atio Dos Santos, and 20-4 Karat Keldanov. Again, another guy in the ACA division. Man, this division is stacked. And that organization, it doesn't get a ton of hype, but man, it's full of great fighters in all the divisions. I got 3 ACA video fights of him. Check them all out. He's just 7-0, but man, he's a very talented, athletic young fighter. Another beast fighting out of Russia. As per most of the Russians, he has a long, strong list of a wrestling base, and he's very light on his feet. He uses the cage well. He controls the action, and he's very aggressive. Fights at a high tempo, and of course, he finishes fights with 4 TKO victories. He hasn't shown us a lot of submission, from a submission standpoint, but he shows good striking on both his hands and uses the leg kicks well. He's got good speed, uses dirty boxing, and at times some nasty ground and pound. So again, it seems like this list of prospects from Russia is never ending. It's incredible. Next on the list, Akhmed Magomedov, 23 years old, 5'7", 145. I believe he recently fought at 155, if I'm not mistaken, but 7-0, 3 submissions, 1 TKO victory. KHK MMA team is his association. Key wins, 6-3 Stephen Concalves and 14-5 Gabriel Miranda. He's fought some decent competition. You take a look at the videos, there's 3 or 4 videos below. He fought in Guerrilla Fighting Championship 24 recently. Surprise, surprise, though, another Dagestan fighter with wrestling and grappling backgrounds. It seems to be his vice. Somewhat limited footage on Magomedov, but he displays that just controlling, aggressive wrestling you see in a lot of these Russians. And to me, I enjoy watching him. And he's in Brave FC now, I believe. So, he'll get some good fights there and some exposure. at 7-0 at 23. Again, he's a guy I could see soon. Next on the list, moving right along, Manuel Gaxhja, 22 years old, 5'10", 145. I believe he fights out of Albania, or he is born in Albania, although he's fought out of the Netherlands as well. 7 wins, no losses, 3 TKO victories, 2 submissions. KOPS Gym. Key wins at this point in his career, he's fought very low-level competition, but he's finished most of those guys. You'll see some video footage below. Taekwondo ITF black belt and third Dan world champion 2014. He's another up-and-comer, and he's an interesting prospect. He's very light on his feet, switches stances a lot, throws some kicks from odd angles, including the front axe kick to the face. You'll see that sometimes. You know, as mentioned, his opponents haven't been high level, but he's at age 22. He has time to improve and get some tougher fights. It was rumored that he was going to step in and fight, I forget which Bellator card, Bellator 196 in a co-main event, to fight Barborík, I believe, but I can't confirm that's true. That would have been a very tough fight for him at this point in his career. But he's one of those guys that seems to have a little bit of a following back home in his country. So it'd be great to see him, because we certainly can use some Albanian fighters in the top promotions. It would certainly help grow the sport. So a guy to watch out for, certainly. Next on the list, folks, going back to Russia, Magomed Yunisulau. 5'7", 145. I believe he's 27. I don't have confirmation on that, but again, so that puts him close to his peak. 8 wins, no losses, 4 submission victories. Has a lot of amateur fights too. Kripos Fight Club. Let's look at some key victories. He's beat 16-5 Marcos Rodriguez, 4-1 Lloyd Allen. 15-4-1 Lloyd Allen. 29-15 Alejandro Rodriguez. 11-6 Alan Popeye. 7-3 Bakayev Bakichev. 13-2 Evgeny Islavi. So some very nice victories over some very, very experienced fighters with more experience than him. I got some videos you'll check out in the section below, which you like. What can I say? Wrestling, wrestling, and wrestling. Cage control, slams, ground and pound, power, and, you know, fights at a high pace and exhausts his opponents. That seems to be the key to success in this sport, and especially from these Russian fighters. A lot of these guys, again, from Dagestan and those parts of the country, come in with this, you know, real dominant wrestling pace. So check them out. Again, moving along very quickly, folks, because we have so many fighters to talk about. But the next guy is Edgar Davalos. I believe he's from Uruguay. I wasn't sure. I had mixed reports that he might be from Paraguay as well. But winners fight team, 24 years old, 12 wins, 1 loss, 5 TKO victories, 3 submissions. Key wins, 7-2 Diego Basulja and 4-2 Sergio Ramos. So he fought a lot of low-level competition. But check him out. He's a very aggressive, very violent fighter. Lots of aggressive strikes, both punching and kicking. Young, talented. And he finishes fights both by KO and submission. Shows some nasty ground and pound. Again, talked about the hard, aggressive kicks, both to the body and the legs. He mixes in a nice high intensity, nice high kick. And as well, I see him throw some flying knees. So he mixes things up, but his big thing is offense from what I see. He's aggressively goes after his opponents. Again, that's going to depend on who you're fighting. As the competition gets tougher for these guys, you got to change that game plan up a bit, because if you get too aggressive, you lose, right? So definitely got to check out. It'd be cool to see a guy from Uruguay or Paraguay come to the UFC. Next on the list, going back to Russia again, Roman Podrugin. 5'9", 145, 22 years old, 9 wins, no losses, 4 TKO victories, and 4 submissions. Key wins, 8-4 Rostov Pachenkov, and 4-2 Dmitry Baikonov. Again, most of his opponents, losing records or low talent. I have one video of him at BYE 9. You can see the link below. Very tough upcoming fight at BYE 12 on March the 7th against Kirill Sokolnikov, who's 20-8. So again, an untested prospect, lots of areas for improvement, but at 22 years old and 9-0, he's got the time. This guy finished his fight, 8 stoppages in 9 fights, and half of the TKO victory and half submission victory. So he has some versatility there. Shows good offensive jiu-jitsu skills, and both from the top and bottom position. But now that he's in the BYE ACA organization, he's going to get some tough fights. And again, like, it doesn't matter 140, 135, 145, 155, wherever you go, up or down. If you're a featherweight, you're going to get some tough fights in the organization. So it's lots of upside, and that, you know, just 22. I'm sure we'll see more of this guy. Next on the list, staying in Russia, Abdul-Malik Saidullaev. Berkut FC, very talent-rich association, 22 years old, 5'9", 145, 7 wins, no losses, 5 submissions. Upcoming fight on March the 7th versus 10-5 Evgeny Lukov. We'll look at some of his key wins. He does have some nice key victories in just such an early career, with 6-1 Albert Kukov, 13-5 Harata Takshanov, and 9-4 Evgeny Askhab. So some nice victories. 3 videos I come up with, you'll check in the link below. Another young Russian fighter, surprise, surprise. And Abdul is, you know, aggressive, young, and has a strong jiu-jitsu game for an up-and-comer. He's shown some very good ground and pound and uses his wrestling effectively to open up positions for submission victories against some quality opponents. And he also has a couple of his fights where, you know, very gritty performances to get to that decision. So obviously there's area for big improvement in the stand-up game. But this guy is, you know, he's long. He's got the reach for this division. 22 years old, so, I mean, he's still got time to get a lot better. And he started his career off at a really good pace. He's got a really nasty guillotine choke. He had 4 of his 5 submission victories from the guillotine. So, another young, vicious fighter to keep an eye on. Next on the list, finally, somebody from Japan. Gets me excited. Kazumasa Majima. Great to see some. I love the Japan history with MMA, so I love seeing guys come out of that country. So many great fighters, and, you know, from the martial arts standpoints, and a great country itself. But 28 years old, 5'7", 145. Again, fighting out of Japan, Mori Dojo. 14 wins, 1 loss. His only loss was a split decision in 2014. 1 TKO victory and 12 submission victories. He's got a victory over UFC veteran 13-10 Ilia Topuria, Dream veteran who's 25-14 Rodolfo Marquez, Sengoku veteran who's 18-9 Yuji Hoshino, and ONE FC veteran who's 13-7 Hiroshi Tanaka. Got some nice victories, and again, I'll attach some videos. This guy finishes fights, folks. 13-14 victories by stoppage. Some very nice submission victories over good quality opponents. Again, I mentioned his only loss was a split decision loss in 2014. Smothering offense from a grappling standpoint. Wears his opponents out. He fights really hard for that takedown. He's relentless to get it. And a lot of the folks do not know about Majima, but he's a hard worker. And I'd love to see another guy from Japan in UFC or Bellator. He doesn't do the stand-up game very well. That's not his bread and butter. You got to get that fight to the ground. But in this day and age, you know, some of the newer fans only want to see the stand-up. But if you're a purist, if you're a real fight fan, and hey, you got to be open about stand-up and the ground game. And you know, back in the day, some of the best fights we've seen, you know, when I was a young guy, you know, in the early 90s, was those fights that the whole fight was on the mat. It just depends what level of jiu-jitsu you're watching. So check him out. Next on the list, Florian Marku, another Albanian fighter, 27 years old, 5'8", 145. Armigos Gym, 6 wins, no losses, 3 submissions, 2 TKO victories. Key wins, 5-1, Stefan Sukapovic. The rest of the opponents, lower level, very little experience, but I went back and forth whether I would include Marku, and I decided to. He's not fought MMA in over a year, and now he's... So the background story in him, he's got a huge kickboxing background where he went 10 years or something without losing any fights. And he got into mixed martial arts, got the 6 victories, but also now he's into boxing. I believe he's 6 or 7-0 in boxing as well. And he just signed a big contract. He's a pretty sought after prospect in boxing. And I can't quite remember which organization he signed with, but he may be pursuing boxing full time now. I did reach out to him, but didn't hear back if he's, you know, plans on sticking to MMA. But hey, this guy is a very exciting fighter, and he wanted to fight in UFC. He made it clear he wanted to fight in UFC, and he wanted to fight McGregor. I mean, who did But this guy's got, you know, great power and hand speed and ferocious kicking. With that kickboxing background, he has a big following in not only his own country, but also all across Europe. He's a big name, and he would have been a great addition to the UFC. Now, who knows? We'll see how long he stays in boxing. Maybe he might stay in boxing for the rest of his career, or maybe, you know, decides to stay in MMA. And if he does stay in MMA, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets picked up right away by a big promotion. But signing this boxing deal, you're going to see him try for a little bit, and depending on how his success rate is, will make it. You know, in my opinion, will decide whether he comes back to MMA or not. But I definitely wanted to include him on the list because he's such a ferocious, exciting fighter with nasty KO power, both in the hands and kicking. Next on the list, Vojto Barborík, fighting out of Slovakia, 26, 6 feet, 145, 12 wins, 1 loss. Only loss was a split decision in 2014. 1 TKO, 9 submissions. The Octagon Fighting Academy is his association. Key wins, 26-19, Guillermo Cadena, 5-1, Nino Stracco, 8-7, Edison Bivolco, and 9-5, Roberto Pastic. You know, he's got some decent wins over some guys. You know, some of his fighters have, you know, lower level competition type guys and low experience, but he has some nice victories. I'll attach 3 of his fights. At this point in his career, he's a ground-based fighter. Uses that wrestling to get the fight to the ground, and he's got some pretty nasty ground and pound. Throws some pretty nasty elbows when it's there. But he's pretty slick with his submission game. You know, showing that he's got 10 stoppages and 12 wins and 9 of them from submission. He's pretty good. He's got a really good top game, and you know, he does actually show the ability to go the distance too. His gas tank's pretty good. He's gone the distance twice, but he's pretty relentless on the ground. And at this point in his career, he's getting some fights on the Slovakian / Czechoslovakian promotion Octagon with a K, and that promotion puts on some big fights, and you know, it's some big attendance. So I'm sure now if he continues this win streak, he's got a lot of eyeballs on him, and we haven't seen many guys come from Slovakia to the big promotion, so it'll be great to see him get a shot. And again, you got to be a fan of the ground game if you're going to like this guy. Next on the list, Victor Hugo Silva, fighting out of Brazil, 27 years old, 5'8", 145, 20 wins, 4 losses, 5 TKO victories, 8 submission, Astra Fight Team. Key wins, 11-5, Edison Costa, 21-5, Doreno Guerrera, and 12-1, the only guy to beat Douglas Philippe. I come up with 5 or 6 videos you'll see in the section below. I went back and forth on Victor. You know, the 4 losses, you don't see a lot of guys with that many losses in any of my videos. However, I believe he's only had 1 loss in his last 15. And that was by an injury. But his last real loss, I think, was in 2013. So 7 years ago, which is quite impressive. And once I seen some footage, I decided, you know what, let's include him. He's really aggressive on his feet, comfortable. He can win fights with his hands. He's got power, both punching and kicking. He's very athletic. Again, very comfortable in the stand-up game. And he's got 8 submissions. So he comes at guys with a lot of different angles, both on the feet and on the ground. Very effective with his jiu-jitsu and his submission game. And he finishes fights. So anytime you get a guy who can submit you, or he's got KO power, and he's got KO power, he's exciting to watch. These are the kind of guys that, you know, the casual fans and hardcore fans together want to see in the bigger promotion. So I think Victor's a guy that could be picked up, or should be picked up. He's got 25 fights or so in his career, and most fights end with finishes, and he's aesthetically pleasing to watch. So hopefully we'll see him. Next on the list, a very young, exciting prospect, and this is a guy that it wouldn't take very long for him to get a shot. James Ednan from England. 21 or 22 years old, one of the two, I'm not sure. 5'8", 145. Team Unity Gym, 4-0, 4 wins, no losses, 2 TKO victories. He's got a good amateur career too. Key wins, I would say, is 5-1 Jordan Bertoff and 4-2 Kingsley Crawford. He's got an upcoming fight against Chris Edwards, who's 13-11 at Cage Warriors 113. Some really nice footage you'll see him. Most of his fights have been in Cage Warriors, so you'll see lots of clear, you know, well-presented videos. You know, even though he's only 4-4, I decided to include him. He's a young, talented, well-trained prospect who's building a lot of momentum and starting to build a good fan base size as well. Good striking, and looks to have a pretty good, not only a good stand-up game, a really good base. Shows some powerful throws and nice kicks as well. Mixes things up to go along with his good hands. He also already has the ability to take his opponents to the mat and has some great scrambles as well. And I believe, like I mentioned, his amateur career, but I believe he's been trained by Dan Hardy and Dina Massinger, I think. So, I mean, he's good. He's fun to watch. He's athletic. He finishes fights and he's well trained. I really think this guy, being in Cage Warriors, he gets a few wins, man. We'll see him in Bellator or the UFC probably in the next year or two tops. Next on the list, Luan Sardinha, fighting in Brazil, Carmen Casca Cross Team / Hard Coelho Associations, 5'8", 145. I believe he's 23 years old. 5 wins, no losses, 1 TKO, 1 submission. So the reason I added him, I didn't even know who he was. I was looking at Fabricio Nascimento, who was 14-0. And then all of a sudden he lost to Luan. So I said, hey, I got to take a closer look at this guy. And then upon looking, I realized he beat 30-plus fight veteran Daniel Da Silva Jr. and 10-7 Joel Nascimento. So beating those kind of guys certainly, was a flag for me to take a look at this guy. The video section, you'll see his victory over Fabricio Nascimento, who was previously 14-0. And this guy, again, is highly unknown to most fans. That victory over the 14-0 fighter really made him pop. And I was surprised. He went in there with confidence. He's aggressive. He looks comfortable on his feet and definitely comfortable on the ground. Pretty good gas tank, too, and got some really good size for the division. So I said, you know what? He's got to be included in the mix. It wouldn't be right not to have him in there. Hopefully, this gets him some eyeballs. And with the kind of track record he has, he fighting cans. I would say this guy could get a shot in the next couple of years. Next on the list, going back to Russia, Armen Gulyan, Golden Team, very, very talented association, full of great fighters. 29 years old, so this guy's a veteran. The time is right now, and this isn't like we talked about Tariq Ismail earlier. This is a kind of a shout out for him. He's a little old to be called a prospect, but a 9-0 with the low miles, I think it'll help him along the way. 2 TKO victories, 6 submissions. So he finishes fights, key wins. Alexander Osterich, who's 5-2, 4-1 Nurmagomedov, and 5-1 Artem Kozlov. Most of his opponents have lower level experience and lower level competition. I did find a couple of videos of him, so check him out. He's a southpaw fighter with a wrestling background. Again, that wrestling component from a lot of these Russian fighters, very powerful and smothering wrestling. He likes to get to his opponent to the ground, and he uses that nasty ground and pound. Either to finish the fight from top position, he strikes, or a lot of the opponents, this striking and nasty elbows he throws opens them up and leaves them open for submission. And again, 6 submission victories out of the 8 stoppages of his 9-fight career. He's pretty impressive. Wouldn't say he's an overly big 145er. He's only 5'6", I believe. But at 29 years of age, the time is now. So hopefully we'll see him again soon. Next on the list, Shamil Gasanov, 24 years old, 5'9", 145, 6 wins, no losses, 5 submissions, another Dagestan fighter. Believe he's a BJJ purple belt. I think he got an extensive background in grappling, though. 2-time world champ, European and British champ, Russian champ. Key wins, Nurstela Turadiev, who's 4-1. And he's got a nice amateur victory over the previously mentioned James Hendon. Looks like, again, he had a pretty decent amateur career. I did find a couple of videos. He's an untested in the pro ranks, but with his grappling background, his aggressiveness, his wrestling background, he's a talented guy. And he has a smothering offense, so I had to include him. 5 of 6 victories from stoppage. I think this guy is his following is starting to get a lot bigger. So I don't think it will take him very long to step up, not only in competition, but get a call from a big organization. So maybe 2 or 3 wins. I think you can see this guy. Next on the list, and we're getting close to the end, folks. Zamir Aripshev, another Russian fighter, 23 years old, 5'9", 145, 9 wins, 1 losses, 4 TKO victories, 1 submission. Key wins 10-5, Tilibak Batrov, 12-4, Zhigang Seo, 6-4, Luis Shigera. A lot of his opponents, again, little experience. I did find some footage. So, Zamir, when I first seen him, I wasn't going to include him because I seen a video of him and he was, he looked pretty raw, but this was his second pro fight he lost years ago. So then I started doing some more digging, and again, you know what? This guy just improved every fight. And again, another young Russian prospects. He does get brawls sometimes, which is a bad thing, so hopefully you get away from that. Good takedowns, good wrestling, and really good ground and pound. And this guy finishes fights, 5 stoppages out of his 9 wins, 4 TKO'd him by victory. So he's pretty good on his feet, and he does like to get the fight to the ground though, where he gets super aggressive. So I think this is one of those guys I talked about where there's, he needs to develop more, but he's definitely got the base, the age, and the ability to do so. So hopefully we'll see more of him. Next on the list, second to last, Gabriel Alves Braga, Brazil, 21 years old, 5'10", so a huge 145er, 5 wins, no losses, 3 TKO victories, Trapatais Association. Key wins, 4-1, Labes do Oliveira Neto, 5-3, Gina Cursores, 4-2, Thiago Tivera, 4-1, Cleaver Fernandez. You'll see a couple of videos of him fighting in Future FC. So why did I include him? Well, 5-0 and 21 and 5'10", being big, were 3 of them, but young, big, strong, quick, with tons of development opportunities. But he's got some nice victories over, equally or more experienced opponents, and he finishes fights, and he just looks like he's a fighter. He's got really good ground and pound, and when I say good ground and pound, the ability to knock you over that ground and pound, which you'll see in some of the videos I have attached below. But, it'd be great to see another young prospect with a big name come out of Brazil, and obviously he's not there yet, but he has the ability to become pretty big name. If he can get another 3 or 4 wins and show us that improvement, he definitely has the base to do so. And finally, the last guy on the list, this is fighter number 35, folks, and excited to mention him. Jose Manuel Sepula Sanchez, fighting out of Spain. 29 years old, so he's another one of these guys on the bubble from an age standpoint. 5'9", 145. 11 wins, no losses, 2 TKO victories, 4 submissions. I believe he has a 12th fight coming up soon. Key wins, 4-2 Albert Diaz, 7-3 Israel Borrego, and 5-4 Yoel Jimenez. Most of his fights have come against lower level competition. The thing is, when you're fighting in countries like Spain and some of these other places, there's not a lot of options to fight higher level opponents, and it's hard to get fights. His last fight was literally in front of a handful of people. I attached 4 or 5 videos below. Check them out. Jose is a grappling-based fighter. Closes the distance, has to, and once he gets to the fight to the mat, he's pretty efficient with his grappling from top position. He also shows some nice quality ground and pound. That's pretty effective for him. And the thing is, I'm not saying Jose he may never make the big show, but certainly deserves a shout out. And, being from Spain, where you don't see a ton of guys coming from, being that he's 11-0, I think this guy deserves a shot. Hey, Bellator for sure. He'd fit in there nice. They have the European tour right now. Why not get a guy like Jose in there? Give him a shot on the big screen anyways before his career is over. But you know what? He deserves a shout-out with 11-0 and 6 stoppages. So I'm hoping he gets a shot. And hey, it's a pleasure to have him in this 35-man list, along these other great fighters. So in closing, folks, that's it. That's 35 prospects. I want to thank everybody for watching. The next video will come out probably in the next 3 weeks. I don't expect any of the videos to be as big as this one. So I really had a cruise. We're at about an hour mark right now. But most videos are going to have the 20 people. The heavyweights, we're right around 15 right now. So we'll see where we end up. But again, I want to thank everybody for watching. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe. It means a lot to me, and it also helps these fighters. The more eyeballs we can get on, the better. And hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Would love to hear from you and talk anything MMA. So I'm closing out. Love you all. Thanks for watching, and we will see you again soon with part 4 of the 2020 MMA Prospects video series. Thank you, everyone.